Here's a sequel to a 2021 movie based on one of the most popular fighting video games. This is my review of Mortal Kombat 2. The film follows the champions of Earthrealm, now joined by newcomer Johnny Cage, as they compete in a deadly tournament in order to save their world from the dark rule of Shao Kahn. The 2021 Mortal Kombat movie was the first one to be rated R and lived up to the violence of the original games, but the story in that film felt pretty flat, with it only teasing the big tournament at the end. Fortunately, this new film has a much tighter plot and delivers a much more impactful movie that has great bloody action and even some comic relief that works. Most of that levity comes from Johnny Cage, an aging martial arts has-been movie star played here by Karl Urban in a really fun performance. Sure, there might be some flaws such as the fight scenes being a bit too repetitive, but overall, if you are a fan of the video games like I am, you should have a really good time watching this. I'm giving Mortal Kombat 2 4 out of 5 stars with a thumbs up. Here's a comedy mystery film starring Hugh Jackman. This is my review of The Sheep Detectives. The movie is about a shepherd who has spent years reading mystery novels to his flock of sheep, and when a man turns up dead, the sheep take it upon themselves to solve the murder. This is a quirky yet charming film based on a 2005 novel called Three Bags Full, a sheep detective story, by German author Leonie Swan. On the surface, this may look like just a silly kids movie, but it's actually very clever and effectively deconstructs the whodunit mystery genre. The human and voice cast is made up of a huge ensemble, most notably featuring Nicholas Braun, Molly Gordon, Julia Louise-Dreyfus, and Bryan Cranston, all giving really solid performances. Overall, this is surprisingly a very fun and humorous movie that also poignantly delves into themes around death in an emotional way that is appropriate for both an adult and kid audience. I'm giving The Sheep Detectives 4 out of 5 stars with a thumbs up. Here's a wholesome comedic drama from Netflix. This is my review of Remarkably Bright Creatures. The movie follows Tova, an elderly widow working as a night cleaner in a local aquarium, who forms unlikely friendships with an old octopus named Marcellus and her new co-worker, a 30-year-old drifter named Cameron. This is a film based on a novel of the same name by Shelby Van Pelt, and it mostly works as a sweet story centered around a platonic relationship between two lonely people navigating past trauma. Unfortunately, the entire movie is almost completely derailed by a hacky and contrived third-act revelation. Thankfully, though, the film is somewhat saved by the leads, two very good actors from different generations, Sally Field and Lewis Pullman, who surprisingly had really good chemistry. Overall, despite the major problems with the plot, I'd say there is at least a lot more good than bad here, and I think most people should be able to enjoy this humorous and emotional movie. I'm giving Remarkably Bright Creatures 3 out of 5 stars with a thumbs up. Here's a suspense film about a police detective trying to save his son. This is my review of Neglected. The movie follows police detective Shaw, who discovers that a young serial killer has buried his son alive, and now he is tasked with solving 3 murders in order to save him. I honestly wish I could say this was an intriguing psychological thriller, and although it starts out okay, it unfortunately quickly devolves. The premise, although not all that original, could have at least been executed in a decent way, but the gaping plot holes and certain decisions the main character makes are just absurd. Detective Shaw is played by Josh Duhamel, who is okay here, and former Disney Channel star Dylan Sprouse does at least show a little bit of charisma as the antagonist. Despite any effort put forth by them, though, this just mostly comes off as silly, and even though it's a small film, there really just isn't any excuse for putting out something this mediocre. I'm giving Neglected 1.5 out of 5 stars with a thumbs down. Here's a film about 4 radical ninja reptiles. This is my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The movie follows 4 mutant turtles who emerge from the shadows of New York City in order to fight a gang of criminal ninjas known as the Foot Clan. This 1990 film, based on the cult comic books and popular 1980s Saturday morning cartoon, was helmed by Irish-British filmmaker Steve Barron, who was known for directing some of the best music videos of the 1980s. This movie has surprisingly aged really well because the filmmakers did a good job at balancing out the tone by blending the gritty atmosphere of the comics with the over-the-top comedy from the cartoon. The other key that really makes this film work are the animatronic turtle suits. They were very advanced for the time, masterfully made and puppeteered by Jim Henson's Creature Shop. I think a lot of people write this off as just a silly movie, but altogether it actually has well-written characters and a lot of artistry. I'm giving Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 5 out of 5 stars with a thumbs up. Here's the first well-known feature-length film from Steven Spielberg. This is my review of Duel. The movie is about David Mann, a family man traveling alone by car for business, but things take a scary turn when he starts to get stalked and terrorized by an unseen truck driver after a minor road incident. This 1971 film originally aired as just a TV movie on ABC, but it was such a critical hit that it eventually received a theatrical release in Europe. Being a smaller, low-budget film, this is definitely a bit rough around the edges, but it really showed how much of an eye Spielberg had for creating tension, and it kind of feels like a creative precursor to Jaws. The movie stars Dennis Weaver, who is known mostly for his television work, and he gives a solid performance here as a normal middle-aged everyman just trying to survive. Altogether, this is a competent edge-of-your-seat thriller that was definitely elevated by promising early filmmaking from a young 24-year-old Steven Spielberg. I'm giving Duel 5 out of 5 stars with a thumbs up. Here's a film about a small group of soldiers on a quest to survive. This is my review of Fear and Desire. The movie follows 4 soldiers caught behind enemy lines as they are forced to examine their fears and desires during their pursuit to get to safety. This fairly short 70-minute anti-war art film was the directorial debut of Stanley Kubrick, and although he wasn't a fan of it later on, looking at it as amateurish, I think it still showed early elements of what made him such a great filmmaker. I watched a nice restored version of this movie which helped keep it from feeling too dated, but the story itself, showing the confusing negative effects of war on 4 soldiers, actually did a good job at making it feel like it was ahead of its time. The small cast is pretty solid, featuring a young Paul Mazursky giving a good performance. Mazursky would later go on to become a fairly well-known director. Overall, this was a pretty decent debut from Kubrick, being an interesting and somewhat cynical introspective war film. I'm giving Fear and Desire 4 out of 5 stars with a thumbs up.